Hi, and welcome to this week's Some Assembly Required video. Today I want to talk about how we prepare our children for when they encounter others who don't believe as they believe. Uh, it- this is something that can make Christian parents particularly uncomfortable. We want to insulate our children and protect our children from outside influences. And there's some validity in that, but the reality is that our kids need to be in the world. Whether you homeschool, send your kids to private school, or send your kids to public school, they're going to encounter other kids, other adults, situations where it's not familiar to them, where the beliefs are very different from their own. And how do we prepare our children for that world, that type of situation? Because we live in a world where not everyone's a Christian. We live in a world where sometimes sin is right in our faces. We live in a world where our beliefs are not the status quo. And that's okay because that is really not, that's kind of the world Jesus went into, right? He was definitely upending the status quo when he's talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Jews of the first century AD. So let's let me give you some personal examples and some suggestions on how to help our children navigate this world as believers. First of all, I think we need to be very careful that we help our children see that while we view the world in black and white, many people don't. Many people see lots of shades of gray. This is why it's popular to say, well, there's many ways to get to heaven. And I think we need to help our children realize that people believe that, and it's not up to them to challenge those beliefs. I think that's important. There has to be a little bit of live and let live. I'm not saying that you don't share the gospel when appropriate, but we need to help our kids realize what are those appropriate situations. If your kids go to public school, yes, they do have rights to share their faith and to talk about their faith and to bring Bibles and that sort of thing. But they also don't want to do it in a way that's like, hey, you tell a little Muslim girl that she's going to hell because she's a Muslim at the lunch table in school. That is probably not appropriate. What maybe a better way is to have them be kind to the Muslim girl, to talk to the Muslim girl and the others in their class, to just be friendly and be a friend and be kind and considerate and helpful and honest and pure and true. Live the Christian life by actions more than words, because our actions speak volumes for words. I would rather have my children be known to be kind and ones that their teachers could count on to befriend the friendless, to show compassion to those to whom compassion is needed, than to know what they really think about God. That may sound weird, but I feel that having my kids learn to live their faith out in a very real way that connects with the hurt and the needs of this world is vitally important. So let's think about helping our kids just practice that kind of faith. Secondly, you need to help them realize that they can ask questions. Knowledge is not the enemy. Like I tell my kids when they've come home and said, I have to learn about evolution today. I'm like, great, let's talk about it. What did your teacher say? Okay, yeah, learn that for the test. What do you think? How does that fit into what we know about God creating the universe? These are questions elementary school kids can talk about, high school kids can talk about. Knowledge is not the enemy. God gave us a wonderful world out there to explore, to learn. So learning about those kind of things is not the enemy. How we can help our children is how that fits into what we know about God. For example, one of my sons, when he was in fourth grade, he came back all upset. I said, what's wrong? He goes, I can't be a paleontologist. That's his love for for now that he wants to study dinosaurs. I said, why not? He goes, well, because God and science don't go together. I said, well, where did you get that idea? I'm not really sure where he got that idea, but I think in science they weren't talking about God. I said, well, explained that they can't talk about God, but that God created the universe. And we learn about the attributes of God when we study science. When he studies the fact that, the phases of the moon, for example, he's studying how God created the universe. He's learning something about God. And when we talked about how we can see God in math, we can see God in, science, we can see God in literature, we can see God in a host of different ways. Even people who don't believe in God, we can see the abilities that God gave them and how that has enriched our own lives and our knowledge of God. So that is another way that we can help our kids navigate these unbeliefs. And we can also remember that because not everyone's a Christian, we can't expect everyone to live like Christians. I mean, that's just the bottom line, right? We wouldn't expect a beginner pianist to sound like a classical pianist. That takes practice, and maybe even if they practice, they will never sound like, a classical pianist who performs with the Kennedy Center, for example. I mean, we have to realize that not everyone is going to be like us. Not even every Christian is going to believe exactly the way we believe and raise our families exactly the same way, and that's okay. Like, again, the world is filled with a lot of different people. And it's okay that they all don't believe the way we do. So sometimes just reminding them that, yeah, you can be friends with this person, but they don't believe in God. That's okay. But let's make sure that we recognize those differences in our home, that we talk about them, and that, that you are still living the life that God has called you to live, and not compromising or doing things you shouldn't do because you're with this friend. Those are the kind of things that we talk about. Several of my kids are friends with kids that I know are not believers. I think that's marvelous. Come on over to our house. See how we who love God live, and that we're open and friendly, and that we love them, even though they don't believe the way we do. Here's one example of how to kind of navigate this when we are concerned about outside influences. When my boys were little, like first and second grade, there was a neighbor boy who had older siblings, was not a Christian, not religious at all. And my boys, I overheard them saying a very bad word. They were in their room together, and I knew they had no idea what this word meant. And so I went to them and I said, I heard you say this. I said, where did you hear it? And they told me this. They heard this little boy say it. I said, And they're like, I said, does he use other kind of bad words? They knew some of the other words. They were going, yeah. I said, well, I said, that what you called one of your sisters right then? I said, that was a very bad word. I said, I'm not going to go into why it's bad. All you need to know now is that it's a bad word. I said, so what are we going to do about this? I said, well, I'm going to talk to your friend, and because I knew from their older siblings who were patrols on the bus that he didn't talk like this on the bus. He didn't talk like this in elementary school. It's totally not allowed. So I knew he could control it. This is not some systematic thing where he just said it all the time. No, I knew he could control it. So the next time he came over, I took him aside and I said, I need to tell you something. I said, you're using language, and I don't need to tell you what those words are, but you're using words around my boys that you know are inappropriate, that you know that you should not be saying. And he goes, yeah. I said, I know that you can stop using those words because I know you don't use them on the bus. I said, so here's the deal. My boys can play with you, but if you continue to use those words, they will not be able to play with you. I said, that's it. So no more using those bad words around my son. Haven't had a problem since. Maybe the odd word here and there. Haven't had a problem. Our little boy respects me, respects our family, and we're happy about that. I mean, sometimes you do have to lay down the law like that. Now, because of that certain situation, I don't let my boys go in this little boy's house simply because it's one of those multi-family houses and I don't really know who's in there. And with older brother siblings who use language like that around a younger sibling, I don't, I'm not comfortable with that. But do they play with them outside? Definitely. Do we invite them to birthday parties? Definitely. Do we have fun together? Yes, we do all those things. So there's just, you have to have some care with how you interact with those who don't believe like we do. But we also can be compassionate and sharing about that, right? The other point I want to make is that we should be careful that we don't give our kids a false sense of superiority, that they're better than anyone else, uh, because maybe we don't smoke or we don't drink or we don't do X, Y, and Z. Um, we need to be careful that our children realize that that doesn't give us some moral high ground. We do this because let's keep on that. We do this because we love Christ, not because we think we're better or more important than anyone else. So we have to keep that focus, right? That we are living our life this way. We are not doing certain things, not because we think those things are bad, which we may, but our main reason is that we want to live a life that is serving and honoring Christ. And that's what we need to keep in mind. And that's how we need to have our kids see. It can be so easy to think, oh, well, we don't do this, and we do all these good things. And we don't want them to have that false sense of superiority. Because in the end, we're all sinners in need of a Savior. We have just, Lord, by the Lord's grace, been called to Him, and others just haven't. So we don't need to have that false sense of security. And we also need to realize that oftentimes God has given us unique situations. In my own family, we have someone in prison. We have interracial marriages and children. We have homosexual marriage. We have out of wedlock children. Um, there's a host of things in our family that most Christians would maybe find offensive or be concerned about. We use those as teaching opportunities. When you have family members who are definitely not living a life pleasing to God because they're not Christians, that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? This is where we become interested. This not interested. This is where our Christianity is really on the line. How do we love them? How do we show them Christ's love in our actions, in the way we talk about them to others, the way we honor them on holidays and birthdays and family gatherings? Do we make them feel like we think they're second-class citizens? Or do we make them feel that they are part of our family and that we love them because of that? Does that mean that we never share Christ with them? Of course not. But I'm talking about just that, whatever your situation is, because none of our families are perfect. None of our kids are perfect. Your child could do something one day that's like shocking. How are you going to react to that? I think teaching our children to have this compassion for others, this way of seeing the world as a place of wonder and seeing God and and seeing how God has placed us and given these opportunities and given us these family members can be so beneficial for our kids. Well, I hope, I'm going to wrap this up now. I hope that you have found some ways to talk about these things with our kids, to help our kids, equip them to go out in the world and be that light of Christ in the world. I'm so glad you joined me for this week's Some Assembly Required video, and I hope I'll see you again soon.